So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Letty. I'm Letty Love Me More. I think that there needs to be more love in this world. I think that currently there's a lot of hate, and we need to find a way to really get back to understanding each other and being neighborly with each other. Because what is happening in this country is mind boggling. Okay, it is mind boggling. I wanted to come on here because I know that a lot of people don't have the luxury of having 10,000 subscriptions to 10,000 news articles, newspapers, magazines, XYZ. So today I wanted to read an article that came from The Atlantic so that people could, kind of have a glimpse into what's going on in the world, right? But most importantly, I feel like we need to be there for each other. We really do, guys. So, with all due, this is an article from The Atlantic. The U.S. military can't do everything at once. Hotspots around the globe mean a heightened risk that any retaliation succeeds. By Nancy. This was written today, January 15th of 2025. Even with nearly $1 trillion budgets, the U.S. military can only do so much. Pentagon officials are privately warning that the United States may not be able to threaten Venezuela's regime, support protesters seeking to topple Iran's government, and to protect its interests in Asia Pacific without being overstretched. The competing demands could heighten the risk to ground forces in the Middle East, who would be in line of fire of any retaliation from Iran should the president decide to strike. Hi, Sylvia. How are you? U.S. military commanders are used to having most of the assets they need to wage war. The cost of 2 decades in Afghanistan toppled 2 trillion, to say nothing of Iraq and more recently Yemen, Iran, and Somalia. But the military faces an unusual problem: how to get ships and planes to protect the U.S. forces in the Middle East. But now in the Caribbean, back to the Middle East, the answer is probably that they can't have everything they want everywhere they would like to. Again, this article comes from The Atlantic. In the week long run ups, the U.S. capture of Venezuela leader Nicolas Maduro, the U.S. sent roughly 11 ships and submarines stationed near Venezuela, marking the U.S. military footprint in a region since Cuban Missile Crisis. Initially, the forces struck suspected drug boats, later stopped sanctioned oil tankers, and ultimately took custody of Maduro from Delta forces snatched him while he was sleeping in Caracas. Many military assets came from the Middle East and have yet to leave the Western Hemisphere. Thank you for being here, everyone. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I hope everyone's doing well. Again, this is an article from um, The Atlantic that came out this morning. Until last fall, commanders in the Middle East could count on having aircraft carriers strike group leaders at group leaders nearby that was either in the Persian Gulf or could reach it quickly. Firefighter jets can take off from a carrier, conduct strikes in defense of U.S. ground forces. Destroyers accompanying the carrier can shoot down enemy missiles bound to the U.S. Not this time. The USS Gerald R. Ford, which had been the closest to the Middle East, left the shores in Europe last fall for the U.S. pressure campaign on Venezuela. It would take at least 2 weeks for the Ford to move back within the range of the Middle East. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, now the nearest carrier, is operating in the Western Hemisphere, the Pacific, and would likely take just a little less time to arrive based on Trump's latest statements. The U.S. strikes in Iraq, no, I'm sorry, Iran, no longer appear imminent, but it hasn't ruled them out. There's a lot of things going on, and people were not paying attention. Drones, tankers, and other flight assets also moved out of the Middle East for the operation near Venezuela. Defense officials told me the capture of Maduro involved more than 150 planes and drones, according to the Pentagon. And although the administration is dangling economic carrots in front of Venezuela, transitional government, it also plans to keep its military stuck sticks nearby, defense officials told me. This is an article again from The Atlantic. Enough. The U.S. military power remains in the Middle East to launch a strike on Iran's security forces or even in its nuclear program. But there may not be enough defense U.S. troops from the regime that has repeatedly vowed to strike back at nearby U.S. assets and regions and allies if it attacks. Iran's theoretic regime may be more inclined if it feels that it's on its last legs. This morning, the U.S. military advised some personnel to leave their bases in Qatar. Yeah. Describing the move as precaution. Iran fired towards the base in June after the U.S. strikes on Iran nuclear facilities. Other nearby bases are expected to make similar cautionary moves. U.S. defense told me America's ability to protect its own troops is where the heavy demand on military assets could come into play. It's not carrying out a strike that we have to worry about. It's the Iranian response, the former military commander who operated in the Middle East told me. During the strike on Iran, the military sent bombers, other aircrafters from the United States, on a round trip mission, roughly 37 hours in all. The USS Carl Vinson carrier strikes groups was operating nearby, and the USS Minutes, I believe that's what it's called, another aircraft carrier, and its accompanying ships also arrived that month. Both are now at their home ports in the United States. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming in. I appreciate you. Trump has begun threatening a new military response on January 2nd as Iran cracked down on protesters who'd first flooded the streets 5 days earlier, but the Pentagon has yet to execute a surge of the firefighter jets, bombers, tankers, and drones towards the Middle East. Should the U.S. quickly fly planes toward the region, they could be there as little as 16 hours. Trump wrote on Truth Social on January 2nd that if Iran violently kills peaceful protesters, which in their own custom, the United States of America will come to their rescue, he added. We are locked and loaded and ready to go. Since the Post, reports have emerged that at least 2,400 protesters have been killed and as many as 1,800 detained. Trump raised the ante last night during an interview with CBS News, threatening to take a very strong action if Iranian authorities began hanging anti government protesters this week. By midday today, he said that we had it on good authority that Iran would not conduct executions. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming in. I appreciate it. Um, right now, we're reading this article. There's a lot going on in the nation, and people are, I think, on their last leg with things that are occurring. Hello, thank you for being here. This is just an article from The Atlantic. I'm reading it just as it is. So, um, if you'd like to stay and listen to it, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. As soon as any president begins discussing the use of military force, the Pentagon planners start coming up with options should the president ask for them. Under this administration, such threats, usually made via social media, come up so frequently that nearly every combatant commander has had to draft us up such a plan. The Trump administration has also discussed attacking Greenland, possibly helping Ukraine in the face of Russia's unwillingness to strike a deal, and prepping to defend Taiwan. In an event of a Chinese aggression, the U.S. nation defense strategy, which helps the Pentagon set its priorities, was supposed to be published by now, but has not been. So the military has some specific doctrine to follow. That's a lot of threats. That's a lot of threats at the same time. And we are not built to do that, a U.S. defense official explained. So, as I said, the Iran war was $2 trillion, and apparently the government only has $1 trillion to spend on all of these wars that we're going through. U.S. Central Command, which is responsible for military operations in the Middle East, presented options roughly a week after President's initial statements about using military force in Iran. These options include military strikes, non military options, including cyber attacks. But the Pentagon also asked the administration to outline U.S. objectives for any military strikes. Many U.S. military officials believe that Iranians must need restoration of their internet, which military strikes would not achieve. SETCOM revised its options earlier this week as the president called for Iran to cancel any planned executions, defense officials told. Several types of protections are in place in the U.S. forces in the region, just not as many in U.S. military may want. They include ground based interceptions, which can shoot down missiles aimed at U.S. military bases and regions, as well as at least three destroyers that could deploy. Defense officials told me, not me, the article, the administration is facing pressure from its allies not to strike from a different reason. Turkey has publicly called for negotiations, according to the Wall Street Journal. Iran's A- Arab rivals, Saudi, Oman, and Qatar, are urging restraint out of fear, and attempts to overthrow the regime could rattle oil markets and disrupt oil oil economy and global economy. Regardless of whether the United States conducts strikes in Iran, the Trump administration pushes to intervene militarily in multiple parts of the world could lead to another kind of financial pressure. In this case, on the American taxpayer. Last week, the president announced that he would ask Congress for $1.5 trillion for the Pentagon. So I don't know about you guys, but that's a lot of damn money. Considering that we're working on a budget right now and we are arguing about the DHS um, portion of the budget, to ask for this much money to go in and invade another country is ludicrous. Not only is it ludicrous, but there is rumors today that military grounds on the ground, boots on the ground, are currently in Guatemala. So I don't know what is going on, but apparently there is more boots on the ground, and now they're in Guatemala. And this is crazy. How much more are we going to take in as the American public, as the taxpayers of this country? So if you're like me and you're frustrated with ICE and you sound like I do, where you can't even put your words together or your thoughts together because what's going on in Minneapolis, in Florida, in Los Angeles, and all throughout our nation to the most vulnerable population, please call Congress and ask them not to fund DHS. And that's all I could say. I hope that everyone's well and stay safe because it's a bitch out there. And I'm just trying to get my thoughts together and keep it together because it's hard just watching what's happening out in the streets. With that, I'm going to close out because I really came on here with the intent of reading this article. So thank you very much and have a wonderful day.